Is it worth going overseas to study medicine? What's the advantage of going to a big name medical school like John Hopkins or something like that?
No, Otago.
Yeah. My personal opinion is it just means you've got that name on your university degree, and that's probably it at med school. Once you start working, not too many people really care or have that much investment to where you went to medical school. As long as you went to medical school and got through, it's time to start doing work.
Yeah. Look, all I'm gonna say is that. Okay, when you look at the teaching quality, for example, there may be there likely will be differences. How much of a difference is that going to make in terms of you being a good or competent doctor? I mean, that's really arguable, and I actually think I've actually looked at some of the studies on that, and there doesn't seem to be a huge correlation actually. And the other thing is that the really big name kind of overseas universities, a lot of the sort of prestige around it isn't really about just like the basic kind of training stuff. There'll be like a lot of other things that are associated. I mean, one of the biggest reasons that people will spend so much money to go to overseas universities is actually the network or the people that you meet. And depending on what field you work in, that could be a really big thing. In the field of medicine, I'm not sure exactly how that quantifies and how much you can really leverage off the connections that you make in there. I would say probably you can, but I would also say that really the connections that you're making when you start working, those are probably vastly more important. And a lot of the people that you're working with will be very well regarded. Like, I mean, in New Zealand, for example, Auckland Hospital like has some world leading doctors, not just Auckland. And so I think my personal view is that a lot of it is sort of overrated. And just my final little point is that if, a lot of the hype around some universities or big universities, the hype has actually been generated and isn't necessarily authentic hype. It's kind of like a hype that has been created. So if you think about who's creating the hype, maybe they've got some other motives in there as well. So,
Justin, can I just add? But it is quite regional. Like, if you're in America and you tell someone you went to John Hopkins, massive deal. If you're working in Hamilton and you say you went to John Hopkins, they're like, okay, thanks. So it's very regional. Like, big American university is big in America. Places like Oxford and Cambridge, huge reputation in the United Kingdom. But when you come to New Zealand, it's like, okay, cool, thanks. New Zealand has 2 medical schools at the moment. It's Otago and Auckland. Everyone's like, okay. And then you sort of get on with your day,
Agree. I've got a lot of friends who have gone and done postgraduate study over in Harvard or Oxford. So, like, for instance, the Masters of Public Health. And then they found the networks. Like, they've gone there to make the networks and things like that. So I think that becomes really valuable. But for an undergrad, it's just about getting a reputable degree behind you.
Yeah. And interestingly, if you go to a really, really prestigious school, actually your chances of graduating from that school for a normal undergrad is actually lower than if you went to another school. So there's some really interesting research around, I think it's actually called like the big fish or like little fish, big pond effect or something. Just go Google it. And it's an actual thing is that it's better to go to a university which is like not as good and actually still get the degree than to go to a university that's better and potentially not. And apparently there's like a 30% increased chance of you failing a degree if you go to a higher level school. It's a really, really interesting body of research around this. I mean, there's actually a book kind of based around this called David and Goliath if you're a reader that I recommend.
And then also when you do your fellowship, most people go overseas to do their fellowship and they get to do research component as well. And so they usually tag on to a fancy university. But by then you kind of know what you want to study and you're going to that university because they're the experts.
Yeah. Yeah.